Why is anime so weird? I think I understand what he wants to talk about, which is codes used in anime that if you actually are not used to watch anime, is something completely foreign and completely strange. So maybe he talks about this, maybe he doesn't, but let's check this out. Right.
I really love anime. It can be so beautiful, emotionally deep, and intellectually stimulating. But often when I show it to my friends, they'll be like, "This is the show you call beautiful? You found this emotionally deep? This is intellectually stimulating for you, huh?" They'll ask me, "Why is anime so stimulating for you?"
Yeah, Motoko from Ghost in the Shell is quite intellectually stimulating. I will never deny this.
Huh? They'll ask me, "Why is anime so overly dramatic? Why is there so much internal monologuing? Why are there so many crazy hairstyles? Why is anime so weird?" When I was first getting into anime, this kind of question made me feel defensive. How dare you insult a thing I like? Clearly, the anime you watch and the anime I watch are totally different. Mine would never be weird. But over time, I began to see things differently. I instead became curious about why this is a common reaction. And over the years, I learned more about animation principles, industry dynamics, and Japanese culture. And through all that, I learned that pretty much all the things that make anime weird are there for a reason. They solve problems that I didn't even know I had with other animation. And they're the backbone for why those beautiful, deep, and smart moments are able to impact me so much. So for this video, what I want to do is look at a number of things that people find weird about anime, look at the reasons for why they're like that, and then show how those reasons work together to get experiences that you can't get outside of anime. And
this is an interesting exercise.
For that conversation, we need to start at the fundamentals. If you want to be able to properly understand anime, it's essential that you understand this book. This is Weekly Shonen Jump, one of the best-selling publications in the world. And nearly every anime is an adaptation of a comic that was originally published in magazines like this one. Every week, a new edition comes out with a single chapter from around 20 different series. But these series are not all equal. At the top are global hits that have been in the magazine for years and get highly acclaimed movie and TV adaptations. Then there's series that have been around a year or two and managed to get an anime, but may not have the staying power to reach international audiences. But over half of the magazine is filled with series that are less than a year old, occupying spots that were vacated when other series were cancelled. Looking at every series that's been in the magazine since 1980, we can see that very few managed to stick around very long, but the ones that do have managed to become some of the most popular IPs in the world. In this extremely boom or bust environment, the average series only has around 20 chapters to make enough impact on the audience to not get cancelled. Series that survive do so because they manage to stand out from their competitors. Imagine, briefly, that you're trying to become a popular comic book author in Japan. If you manage to get published in this magazine, you're
I think that like the word competitor is the wrong one because they're not fighting for attentions if they are striving to find success in their art. So I think that like they don't exactly compete, even though there is like scoring and everything, and there is like a top to it, right? But what I try to say is that it is not exactly competition. It's more a drive for success that doesn't happen often because of how difficult this industry is, especially within the manga. Anime is an absolutely brutal industry to be in. If you don't know much about it, you should check it out. It is actually this fucking violent.
Directly competing for space with a series that outsells Stephen King and a series whose movies outsell Christopher Nolan. How can you make a big enough impact quickly so people will stick around to see your larger plots? Well, if you're Tatsuki Fujimoto, you open with a giant tomato monster and a dude holding a chainsaw-powered dog. So, why is anime so weird? In part, it's due to survivorship bias. The only series that can survive long enough to become anime are the ones that are weird enough to stand out as I flip through this magazine. Now, with the same logic, you can actually answer a number of things that people find weird about anime. Like, why are the hairstyles so weird? But there is a little more to explain with this one, and it has to do with the print quality of this magazine. Specifically, notice that it's all in black and white and printed on recycled paper. How do you think this might affect what kinds of character designs work? Drawings that are too
Oh, this is actually an interesting but like an interesting knowledge that we actually get to share.
Complex can have a lot of the detail and intricacy lost by this lower print quality. But if you try to address this by simplifying your character design, your different characters can become indistinguishable from each other, where they all look too generic for the audience to be able to tell them apart. One metric Western animators use for making characters distinct is the outline test. The idea here being you try to make different characters different shapes, so even at a glance they have these super recognizable outlines. Western cartoons often use really exaggerated body proportions to do this, which solves the problem really well, but introduces its own problems. Anime often likes doing real-life accurate choreography, which you can't do with unnaturally shaped characters like this. Therefore, you generally see anime characters drawn in a way that lines up well with real-life proportions. In addition, it can be hard to take unrealistically sized characters seriously, so mature shows will often prioritize realistic proportions above easily recognizable shapes. Now, of course, weird outlines are far from the only way to make characters distinct from each other. If you look at shows like Archer or Young Justice, you can see that characters are still really distinguishable from each other, but instead of unique shapes, characters have really different colors and clothing. But a lot of anime can't use this, because some of the most common settings for anime, schools, sports, and the military, all have mandatory uniforms that will make every character look the same. The combined restrictions of having pretty uniform body shapes and pretty uniform uniforms, I think makes it natural the way to distinguish characters that's pretty unique to anime. And what that is trying to make characters entirely unique and differentiable just based on the face. So that usually involves really wild and bizarre hairstyles and very detailed eyes. A common question you'll hear is, why are anime eyes so big? Now you might think we'd be able to use the same logic as we used for hairstyles earlier, but you actually can't. And that's because anime eyes aren't actually big. Like, sure, they're bigger than eyes are in real life, but they're not even bigger than Western animation, say. Like, here, if we line up a bunch of characters from Western cartoons and from anime, look at the size of the eyes. Heck, Homer's
Actually, I never noticed. This is actually a fair point.
eyes are bigger than most of these anime characters' heads. Now, fairly enough here, you could point out that it's unfair because the anime characters have smaller heads. And sure, we can instead scale them so the head sizes match. Still, almost all the anime characters have smaller eyes than these cartoon characters. And when I was writing this, I was going to say something like, oh, of course there are exceptions, and...
Give me just 1 second. Right.
romance moe characters in anime have these big eyes that are way bigger than Western cartoons. But then I actually measured it, and these also aren't any bigger. So why does everyone say that anime eyes are so huge? Well, really, I think it's 3 things. First of all, it is true that the irises are way more prominent. Like, this entire eye is basically just one iris, whereas this eye is just a pupil. Also, the mouths are way smaller, and I think most of our perception of how big the eyes are is relative to the mouth and not relative to the head in general. And then also the eyes are way lower on the face, which again tricks our proportions into thinking they're relatively bigger. A lot of anime also have eyes that change art styles to better reflect character emotion. And a lot of anime directors love doing extreme close-ups on eyes, which requires them to be a lot more detailed in general so that when you do this, it still makes sense which character you're looking at. Why are colors in anime so weird is a question you should be able to answer now. A bright and flashy color palette is a great way to make your series stand out, and extreme hair and eye colors are great for making your characters stand out.
Makes sense.
Want to easily distinguish 6 guys with similar builds, hairstyles, and matching uniforms? Boom, neon-colored hair. Even mostly works in black and white. You're generally expected to suspend your disbelief and not question why this character has purple eyes or this high schooler has gray hair, although in some stories it is plot relevant. Anime generally prioritizes the emotion of visuals over what is literally being shown, sometimes subtly, like in film color grading, but other times much more overtly, in ways that only work in animation. And it goes beyond just the colors. Anime is very willing to warp space and physics to get more in a character's head, and extended visual metaphors are quite common. Part of the reason for this is that Japanese is very indirect. Both linguistically, you often don't need to state the subject of a sentence, for example, and culturally, you often get in conversations that are technically about one thing, but really about another thing.
I hope you get to see a ghost someday. 'Cause I'm sure there's a ghost out there somewhere who wants you to see it, you know?
This tendency to be indirect, combined with a desire to make empathetic characters, can explain a lot of quirks about anime. Why does a character that normally looks like this look different for jokes and for serious moments? Indirectness plus character empathy. Why are there so many backstory flashbacks? Again, indirectness plus character empathy. We can also use this to explain why does anime sound weird? The abundance of non-literal and metaphorical sound effects. Sometimes these can accompany a visual metaphor, like flames burning in passion. But sometimes the audio is a metaphor in and of itself, where it's representing some internal character emotions that we're not seeing visually.
Oh, wow.
Sometimes non-literal audio is just used to emphasize and punch up a scene.
Then admit you like this guy!
It's not true!
Yeah, huh?
Nuh-uh.
You do!
I don't!
You do!
The answer is no!
Except it's actually yes! Okay, was not expecting this cuteness.
Whereas other times, the entire scene is based around the audio. Audio in anime is also especially
It doesn't happen as often as it should, because like I remember that I witnessed like a scene where like audio was the focus, but especially like the audio of what the ambient audio kind of, how can I say it? Like basically how does sound the powers in the anime, and it doesn't happen quite often enough, but I guess you get bored of it quite fast as well.
emphasized because of how direct they adapt comics. Say we start with 2 comics that are both action comedies about retired assassins. The adaptation of the American comic will focus on getting good actors and will heavily adapt the script to fit a movie better.
Some thumbsucker tagged them red. Red? Retired, extremely dangerous.
Meanwhile, the anime adaptation of the Japanese comic will have a lot of scenes that are shot-for-shot duplicates of the comic. Because of the massive popularity of Japanese comics, they expect many people who watch the show will have already read it. Therefore, their main priority is doing a faithful adaptation and focusing on things that aren't in the original comic, like sound effects and music. So, why do so many anime have such elaborate intros? Well, it's some of the only content that's entirely unique to the anime adaptation. So there's a lot of effort put into getting some of the top bands in Japan and doing a lot of creative and unique visuals.
music production value of anime is absolutely like out of this world, I believe. I think that like they really did something about letting youth express itself through a media that is like for youth, right? But also like let independent music become something, because like there is what we can all call anime music now, right? But back then it was some sort of alternative and independent type of genre. It wasn't like something cool or anything. I mean, maybe it was, but I don't like it didn't have the impact that it does now, at least. Maybe I'm wrong about this, don't sue me.
This close relationship to comics also means that a lot of the idiosyncratic things about comics are transferred over to anime. For example, Scott McCloud, in his book Understanding Comics, has a fantastic chapter about how time acts weird in comics. Like, if you look at this panel, it implies there's some motion of time. Characters are reacting to each other and doing things in a certain order, but it's a static image where nothing's actually moving. This carries over into anime by making a lot of situations where time is relevant kind of weird. Often characters will say, oh, I'm going to do this in X amount of time, and then the actual time in the show is nowhere near that.
1 second. 2 seconds. 3 seconds.
Jotaro couldn't figure out why Dio had suddenly vanished amidst the standstill.
4 seconds.
The high prevalence of thought bubbles in comics also means that anime that are directly adapting comics have a lot more internal monologue than anime that don't. And this, of course, combines with the time weirdness to get the classic anime internal monologues.
Is he going to think that I'm Kira if I go for the win? I suppose I could just lose on purpose, but if I do, it could work against me. Since he'd expect Kira to want to win, he might also expect me to throw the match to avoid suspicion.
I've sometimes had people ask me, why is the lip sync so bad in anime? And if you're watching in English, there is an obvious answer. It was originally made in Japanese, and the English voice actors are just putting their voice over the footage and trying to match the lip movements that are already there.
Oh my god, what the hell's happening here? These are the fastest lip slaps I've ever had to sing!
But sometimes when you watch it in Japanese, the lip sync is just as bad.
大変だ! 大変だ!
What's going on here? Well, actually, it's the same reason. Because anime are so often direct comic adaptations, the animation is often made before the voice acting, even for the Japanese voice actors.
基本的に後からですね、絵に合わせて撮ります。
To compensate for this, anime animators tend to use more generic mouth motions, which makes the lip sync for Japanese look worse, but ironically, I think it makes it better at being dubbed into other languages. The mouth motions being more generic makes it less obvious that they're speaking in a language differently than what the original animation was intended for.
Places like this.
Shut the fuck up before I toss your ass out of here, damn it!
One of the rare anime that made the voice animation after the voice actors have done their performance was Akira, and you can see how much more awkward the English dub sounds over it.
なんだと？てめえ誰に向かって口聞いてんだ？へ、口の聞き方が気に入らねえか？
Damn it, Tetsuo! Who the hell do you think you're talking to, you moron?
Ha! You don't like what you're hearing, do ya?
Another reaction to these simplified lip flaps I see sometimes is, why does anime have such bad animation quality? And actually, it's my opinion that anime both does have worse animation quality than Western animation, but also a lot better animation.
I think that like it's more standardized by now, so at least like I agree with this opinion, because like better animation, even if it's overall worse, it's because it's standardized. Like there is a baseline for anime that is not present for cartoons in such a codified way and reusable way, recyclable way, right? Reusable way.
Quality. They're a lot more willing to be inconsistent with the level of effort they're putting into any scene. And this kind of comes down to a different business strategy. Like, if you're going to make a 10-episode show, you could put the same amount of effort into all of those episodes. Alternatively, you could invest your effort non-linearly, say doing something like putting 70% effort into 9 episodes. Then you can use that leftover effort to make the finale almost 4 times better than it would be otherwise. Now, these are just arbitrary numbers, but this is the kind of philosophy I'm talking about, where anime is willing to have deeper valleys where the animation quality is bad in order to have higher heights where the animation quality is really good. One of my favorite examples of this is Naruto, which started in...
Naruto is really the best example to explain to portray what he is trying to say.
2002, and made a 22-minute episode every week. Now, if you've ever animated anything by hand, you know how hard it is to make a 22-minute animation in just a week. But they not only did it once, they did it every week for over 20 years. So the strategy of non-linear budgeting was super important for them, as it let them do a lot of low-quality episodes, and then still have their season finales or big climactic episodes be super, super good, because they have a portion of budget from all of those episodes before it. To see what I'm talking about, let's look at episode 19 from Naruto Shippuden. This is episode 239 in the overall series. Throughout this episode, we get a grab bag of a number of techniques that are collectively called limited animation, which is a term for techniques that are used to limit the amount you actually have to animate to still get a cohesive shot. So this can include things like hiding mouths when people are talking to avoid having to animate them. Classically, you also just have static images that you pan around instead of having to animate to give an illusion of motion. Like in this scene, they turn 7 still images into 40 seconds of the show by just kind of sliding them around while characters are talking. Or like, this is a real shot from the show where Kakashi just kind of slides over the water. Now we can compare that low-budget episode to episode 26, which is a very high-budget episode. This episode's the climax of the last 26 episodes of the show, and it's also a big character moment with one of the main characters of the show really stepping up in a way they haven't so far.
もう分かってますよね。私の性格。
And because of that, it's obvious the producers have put way more budget into this. It's just jam-packed with shots that are a lot more complicated and have a lot more individual frames of drawing than what we saw with episode 19. Like, just watch this shot. Unlike the other episode, which turned 7 images into 40 seconds of content, this turned around 70 images into around 5 seconds of content. And it's just so packed with fun little details. Like, here at the beginning, there's a focus pull, which I don't see too often in 2D animation. Or the fact that this guy has a gun that comes out of his mouth, and then she punches through it to destroy his head. Like, I didn't notice any of that during my first watch of this. In anime, these disproportionately higher quality shots are called sakuga, which is another one of these words that has a little different meaning in English than in the original Japanese. But boy, do I love sakuga. It's another one of these things that's more unique to anime. Not to say that other animation can't have really high quality shots. It's just this sudden jump in quality is a very uniquely anime thing. And by high quality, there's really a large number of characteristics that sakuga can have. We've already seen in that Naruto example higher frame rate than normal and impressive choreography, but sometimes you'll combine that with really dynamic camera shots, like here. Or sometimes sakuga will integrate 3D elements really well. Sakuga is also one of the prime places where you'll see the shifts in art style I talked about earlier, where character designs can be made more simple or more complicated depending on the kind of shot they're trying to do. Consistency is way less important than trying to sell a specific emotion. Sakuga shows up in a lot of action scenes, but that's by no means the only place it is. Sometimes it's impressive shots of cooking a meal or going for a swim. Sometimes it's trying to convey a feeling of unease, or trying to express complicated character emotions without any dialogue. Of course, where Sakuga is used is often largely determined by the budget of the production. A show with a small budget might use limited animation even for climactic moments, while a larger budget show can spend the money and time on Sakuga for all sorts of scenes, from action scenes to jokes,
Oh, vegetables! Be gone!
to just chill character moments and establishing shots. At the beginning of the video, I used this clip as an example of a shot that people who don't watch anime would find weird. And honestly, thinking this is weird makes sense. You've got these characters with crazy hairstyles, these weird...
Yeah, and basically like yelling at each other because of something stupid happening is not so this is what is important about codes that anime does have and Western cinema do not, exactly because it's way more free in its way to express itself, right? And anime has its codes that are actually accepted within all the anime community, and that makes it so like you said, and like I believe, can make it feel weird for people that are non-initiates, basically, because you need to understand these codes, or else you're completely lost, not understanding why one emotion lead to another one, and that makes it that is understood as something funny. You know, it's really stupid, but at this point might as well tell you about the fucking ABC and how to fucking count. How much I like to feel like I'm dissecting this whole fucking subject. So basically, it's codes that you do not that are only used by anime, and if you don't know them, well, you will find it weird, strange, and complete and absolutely actually like not likable, not interesting. At least I think that like when I try to share anime to some people to show them the greatness of Japan, well, it was something that I found was a problem. But anyway,
abstract lines in the background, and in general, what feels like way too much intensity. But let's talk through what we now know about it. The comic this anime was based on was trying to get a realistic depiction of high school sports, popular in a magazine filled with epic fantasy and high-stakes thrillers. So they needed a stylish enough art style to stand out. Within that art style, they needed a large number of characters to be easily identifiable just on the face, and for that to work even when the faces are really distorted. Plus, it has to still look good in black and white. That level of emotional intensity is also important for competing in the magazine, but it can come off as weird when the audience isn't matching that level of excitement. Even some of the fastest spikes in the world might not be all that impressive if you're not into sports.
Kovacevic, Zaitsev has just delivered an ace.
But by combining all the tricks we've talked about so far, anime tries to get you in the head of the players and experience the same level of emotion that they do. Say by adding some really exciting music and non-literal audio and lighting. Then we can throw in a visual metaphor of the player's mindset at the time.
Which is, if you never fucking watched anime, so fucking over the top that like some people will actually completely lose them, do not understand the logic of why anything is happening whatsoever. So, which is understandable, but like it's just funny that like, yeah, pretty much just like to a visual metaphor of this of the mindset of this dude playing fucking handball, being like, the fucking ground fucking being destroyed. If you're not used to that, you may find it abnormal.
Then we throw in some Sakuga with a change in art style and relativistic time to really sell an impact. Then we finish with an impossible camera angle, more bullet time, and some internal monologue. When all this works together and lands successfully, it means that for a really overly dramatic click like we saw earlier, you can get people to match that level of excitement and be way more invested than they would be otherwise. Scenes like this are totally what made me a fan of the series and anime in general. And hopefully by watching this video, you can now have a better understanding of why this strange-seeming stuff is happening. Although I will say the serve I was showing there is not actually what these reaction shots are in reference to.
Thank you so much, Fractal Philosophy, for this this video. This was really awesome. And yeah, this explains quite a lot, and I got to learn some things about anime.